Claire comes face to mutant face with Axel, while Lucian and his cannibalistic hordes are hot on their trail. Is this the end for the last one on Earth who can give birth, or is there something else on the horizon? Maybe a teeny bit of love and hope? Maybe. We'll talk about it in Toxx number 5 from Blood Moon Comics. See you in 3. And welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is our review of Toxx number 5 from Blood Moon Comics. And in this issue, which is the last issue in the first arc, Claire and Axel reunite, sort of, and go on the run from Lucian's cannibalistic mutants, while the folks of Town get a glimmer of hope for a new future. But before we get started, please like, share, comment, subscribe, leave a comment to let us know how we're doing. Hit that bell for notifications so you can get the little notification pop-up when we publish more videos, and make sure you stay to the end for our final tally and score. So let's get into the credits for Toxx number 5. This is written by Evan Carruthers and Eric Palicki, art by Ben Worrell, colors by Damir Rozic, letters also by Evan Carruthers, and the main cover A, is drawn by Brian Demarest. So let's recap what happened in the previous issue, because it got pretty wild there for a minute. Claire and her friends finally managed to catch up to this mythical peace train that circles the surrounding countryside. That is a self-sufficient train that has a group of survivors that are self-governed. They are self-sustainable. They have all these things on there that could keep you in a comfortable and safe society, so to speak, on wheels. It just so happens to be on wheels. They catch up to it, but unfortunately, Lucian's mutants attack the train, derail it, and the whole thing goes to pot. And it's a big old mess. Claire manages to escape, and when we left off at the end of the last issue, she comes face to face, or mutant face, with Axel, who is now a mutant, and he's got this lower jaw that's all mutated and gross and disgusting. And now they're in a face-off. Is the father or her child going to kill her, or is something else going to happen? And that's where we left off. Let's catch up now in this issue for Toxx number 5, which is the finale of the first arc. It turns out that through his haze of being a mutant and his disfigurement and deformities, he still recognizes Claire for who she is, and he still loves her. And so even though he looks gross, Claire and Axel decide to partner up and take off together, with Lucian witnessing everything that's going on from a distance and sending his mutant flesh-eating hordes after them, because Lucian is still under this delusion that that mutants are meant to take over the world, and he has to eliminate humanity, and especially Claire, because she's giving birth to a child, which was something they thought couldn't happen and hadn't happened for at least a few decades. In the beginning of the issue, we do get a brief catch-up from Claire's point of view about her mother and where the apocalypse first started to come about. And apparently was some kind of, even though we're not giving any details about it, there was some kind of ecological disaster where the sun turned the atmosphere toxic, or something to that degree. We don't get much details in the series, which is a bit of one of the downers of what's going on, because we don't understand what's happening. But her mother gave birth to her without the father being present, because they got separated in the mass evacuations. Now Claire has sort of resigned herself that she was going to do for her child what her mother did for her, which was try to give her the best life possible and try to keep the human species going, even if there is no father around. Fortunately, Axel sort of came to his senses through the haze of his being infected as a mutant, and even though it's kind of a sort of a weird pairing, they're going to try and work together to raise their child and hopefully keep the species going. And so what they decide to do is, barring anything else to do, they decide to head west towards the shore, towards the ocean, where, according to the folks at Town, nobody has ever returned. So maybe there's something out there, maybe not, we'll see. Meanwhile, some of the rats that came from Town that came up top to investigate the wreckage of the peace train, hours later, they find Claire's journal. They take it back to Town, and they read in the journal all of Claire's thoughts about hope and recognition of her love for the Doc and for Brody and for all her friends that she's lost, and how Isaac, who is the mayor of Town, effectively drove her away because she knew if she stayed, Isaac was intending to use her as a bargaining pawn because she is the only person that they know of that could still get pregnant. And so what happens is, through the reading of the journal to the surrounding folks and the citizens of Town, they effectively form a new collective and become a revolutionary force and decide to rise up and overthrow Isaac. Now, he yells and screams about it, and they don't really do anything other than essentially say, you're not in charge anymore, get out of here. But they also give him an inkling that he knows where Claire and Axel went. It's not clear how he knew where they were headed, but he knows where they're headed, so they essentially decide not to execute him as part of a civil war, if you will. And that's the end of the story, effectively. That's it. Claire and Axel go in one direction. Lucian and his mutant forces are chasing them from a very, very far back distance. And Town is now under new management. There's hopefully a more democratic and self-governing management that's less about power and bargaining and more about helping each other out. More of a kind of a socialist ideal, if you will. And that's the end. So if you want to understand where this story is headed as far as what's the next issue, what's the next arc, we don't have any details on that. So interesting fact that, you know, this is sort of contained, but it ends with a very open ending. So you don't quite know where it's headed next. It's sort of more like ending on a to be continued rather than a more formal finish. So what do we like about Toxx number 5? Well, it really ends on a, given the circumstances that it's a post-apocalyptic scenario, there's flesh-eating mutants, the possibility of birth is almost eliminated, and everything is toxic and everything is destructive, and it seems like everybody's just on the verge of dying. It ends on a surprisingly hopeful note, that there's a point to love, that there's a point to hope, and there is value in fighting for a better future, if not for ourselves, but for our next generation. So this is a very message-heavy type of series, if that wasn't clear. And this issue probably is the heaviest in terms of messaging and trying to make a point than any prior to it. You know, if you don't mind a message in your story, that's fine. As long, generally speaking, as long as story comes first and message second, generally that plays out okay. In this case, message comes a very close second, and it's really heavy-handed, but you get the message, and it's a good one. You know, hope and love for a better future is always a good message. What didn't we like about it? Just kind of the lack of closure, if you want to call it that. Claire and Axel go off into the sunset, almost literally. Lucian is hot on the trail, and Town almost gets a sort of resolution or new status quo, but that's the only place that receives any kind of new status quo. The chase is still on. Lucian is still following them, probably faster than Axel and Claire can stay ahead of them. And okay, I mean, it's sort of an odd place to end the story. It doesn't really resolve anything other than Town's under new management. So the satisfaction level of this final issue in the arc is lacking. So you don't really feel like, okay, that's it. What do we do from here? You felt a little, even though it does say to be continued, you felt like you're left hanging a little bit. Let's talk about the art. So the art from Ben Worrell is good. The mutants are weird and gross in a kind of post-apocalyptic kind of way. Their action sequences, and there are a few of them, are well done. There is some violence, and there's some language, and bloody violence, and very rough language. But it's presented in a way that makes sense for the story. The mutant designs look good. The composition and the action look good. And generally speaking, it's a good art presentation overall from Worrell, and colors by Damir Rosic. So final thoughts. What do we think about Toxx number 5 from Blood Moon? It's a story with a message. The story still stays ahead of the message, which is the order in which it should go, but it's a very close second. And you get the feeling that there's absolutely more to this story, that you want to know what happens to Axel and Claire, which is a good place to end. This is a good way to end the story, is on a note that says, I want to know what happens next. That's always where you want to end the story if you didn't intend to continue it. On the downside, the ending just doesn't really satisfy, because it leaves so much up in the air. So much of it is open-ended that there's not a whole lot of satisfaction in this finale. So therefore, we're going to give Toxx number 5 from Blood Moon Comics. To be frank, just because of that lack of satisfaction level and just the almost complete absence of a new status quo, we're going to give this a 7 out of 10. No, you know what? Take it back. I'm going to be fair about it. I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. You have to enjoy the story, and if you can't enjoy the ending, then it didn't do what it needed to do. So we're going to give it 6.5 out of 10. Therefore, thank you for joining us. This has been our review of Toxx number 5. If you like more reviews like this one and you want to hear more, please stay tuned through the outro.